Hello, hello, hello. Today I am here with Kim Gross, and we're going to be talking about a subject that I have had an issue with my whole life, basically. People pleasing. I'm so excited to jump into this. It is going to be so much fun. For those of you that don't know me, I am Sabrina Victoria. I am the host here at her talk show. If you have not already subscribed, girl, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button. Listen, let's just jump right in. Let's have some fun. I'm trying to find my video right now and I can't find. Where's my intro at to introduce this girl?
Let's get ready because today's guest is about to change the way you view your world. This is Her Talk Show, hosted by Sabrina Victoria.
Here in the podcast world, we like to make this look real sweet and simple, but there's a lot of stuff going on this end.
I hear you.
Yes, if you are listening live, welcome. And if you're listening on the replay, make sure you drop into the comments and say hello so we can say hello back. Listen, we've had over 500 women grace this Her Talk Show stage, and we are adding another one to the list today as a recovering codependent. Kim helps people go from perfectionism and people pleasing to powerful. She has spent a lifetime pleasing and perfecting, all while losing herself in the roles that she played, and didn't really know how to prioritize herself. So she was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease in 2005. What? And since then, she has been on a personal growth and healing journey. It is her passion and desire to help others to create real and meaningful relationships and create the inner power to dare greatly and create the life they deserve. Welcome, Kim.
Woo. Thank you so much for having me here today.
Yes, I am so excited to have you here. And you are a fellow podcaster.
Yes, I am. Masks Off with Kim Gross.
Yes, girl. I love having a podcaster in the house because you get it.
I get it. Yes. And I love to talk about this shit. And I know you said we could swear, right? We're allowed to swear.
Girl.
Take off the mask and swear. Let's just swear.
Yes,
I love to swear. It just makes me, when I say, fuck, it just makes me feel good. And my 24-year-old son yells at me all the time, "Ma, why you got to cuss all the time? Why you got to cuss?"
Oh my gosh, my son does the same thing.
No lie. Yeah. Why you got to cuss all the time? Because it makes me feel good.
Yeah, he actually calls me out. My son's 19 and he'll call every once in a while. He doesn't quite do that, but if I say something, he'll be like, "Whoa."
You know what? And listen, I don't know what the layout is for your show and which direction you want to go in, but I just want to say one thing. See, right there in and of itself, our son's telling us not to swear and cuss because subconsciously, I swear there's got to be a belief system that it's not okay for women or their moms to swear and to cuss because it's not ladylike. And being a good girl and being perfect and being a lady all underpins the people pleaser. And we'll talk about more of that when you're ready.
Yes. I've never even thought of it that way, actually. It's interesting.
Oh, yeah. I could just tell the energy.
I'm going to ask him, actually. I think I'm going to ask him that, like, hey, is this an overall thing or is this a mom thing? He'll tell me. That would be interesting. Wow. Well, listen, I'm super excited about this. So, and I'm right on the same boat, but I would love to hear your story. My peeps already know my story. So, people pleasing and perfectionism. When did you even notice this was a thing for you? Like, when did this come into your?
Yeah, I love that question. So I tell the story all the time that it started for me when I was 10 years old. So prior to that, I loved to play in the snow. I loved to play in the leaves. I loved being in nature. I was a tomboy. I would play with the boys, play football, just being. I knew how to just be. And in school, I was quiet. I was a quote, good girl, an average student. my report cards always reflected, Kim is a pleasure to have in class. She doesn't, she doesn't disrupt. She's a good girl, essentially. Then 5th grade, 10 years old, my mom had a conference with my teacher, and he said to her at the parent teacher conference, and I was there for some reason. I don't know why I was present, but I was there. And he said, again, Kim is such a pleasure to have in class. I love having her in my class, but I want you to know that she is not working to her potential. Not working to her potential. She is capable of doing so much more. So in my little 10-year-old brain, something went off that, okay, I need to start applying myself and I need to try harder. So I started to study more, and I started to get the hundreds on my quizzes. I started getting little comments from him. Great job. I'm so proud of you. This is wonderful. This is amazing, right? Endorphin hit, validation. Like, oh my goodness, if I just apply myself, I'm going to get this kind of attention. I'm going to get this kind of validation that I'm okay on the inside. It felt so freaking good. And then I would take home my report cards, and then it would continue in the home. Oh my God, look at Kim. She's getting straight A's. Isn't this amazing? My aunt would even give me back then like $2 for every A that I brought home. It was just more and more and more external validation. I wasn't getting the grades and I was just being me. It was crickets. There was nothing, right? No, like, oh, I love you for being who you are. You're such an amazing daughter. You're such a courageous person. You have such kindness, my qualities that are my essence. I would never hear any of that. So then as I continued to go on through middle school and high school, I did more of the overachieving with the grades and the sports, became president of my class, and learned very quickly that if I performed and I perfected, then I would feel good about who I was. And on top of that, so that was 10 years old. I hit puberty at a very young age, 11 years old. So the next year, and I'm telling you, Sabrina, it was like something happened to me overnight, because before that I was average height, but I was flat as a board, like no boobs at all, just straight, skinny, flat as a board. Overnight, like, what the fuck? All of a sudden I had huge boobs, big ass, big hips, stretch marks to show, acne everywhere, and I sprouted up. And I was taller than all of my classmates, and I looked so different. I felt so different.
Wow.
And the way that we're wired for belonging, right? We want to be the same as the herd. We don't want to be different from the herd, because if we're different, then our survival is at stake. So now here I am, I'm 11 years old, 12 years old, looking completely different. I hated with a passion having to change for gym class, because I didn't want to reveal my body. I had such body image issues already at the young age of 11. So I would go in the bathroom and I would hide and then change in there. And the boys did ostracize me. They would call me names like Hooters and Thunder Thighs. And every time I ran in gym class and my boobs are like bouncing all over. I mean, I went from literally like flat to a double D, or, I was big. And so I didn't feel okay with who I was. So you see the picture where inherently I didn't feel like I was worthy or that I mattered. So in order to compensate, in order to feel okay in the world, I had to put on my mask, which is my podcast, Masks Off, of people pleasing, perfecting, and performing. Because then that would and it didn't always, but temporarily take the spotlight off of how ugly and fat and unworthy I felt. Because if I was performing and I was achieving, then I was getting that validation. So that's how the people pleasing and the perfecting started for me. And that's how I started wearing the masks at the age of 10.
Wow. Do you think those two pretty much always go hand in hand?
The more I'm seeing in my own life and the more that I see with people that I have on the podcast and clients, I do see it. They're very closely tied together. I would say they're cousins. If you have perfecting, you have somewhere some people pleasing. Definitely, if you have people pleasing, you have perfecting.
If you have people pleasing, you're perfect. Yeah, definitely.
They are cousins for sure.
So started right around 11.
Yeah.
And you're not 11 anymore.
I am not 11 anymore.
So
I'm 55 now.
You're a tad bit older.
Yes, and did a shit ton of work along the way.
So when did this hit you in the face? When did you finally like realize, oh, whoa, that whole thing?
Okay, so the people pleasing for sure became very evident to me when I was diagnosed with the autoimmune disease in 2005. I was so sick in 2005, and my kids were 5 and 2 at the time, and I could barely take care of them, barely. And I knew that if I wanted to be the mom that I wanted to be for them, and if I wanted to show up for them in the way that they deserved, I had to do something very different. And the first thing I had to start doing was developing a self-care plan. And taking care of yourself first and putting that proverbial oxygen mask on before assisting others is the last thing that a people pleaser can do. It is gut-wrenching painful to put other people ahead of oneself because there's so much guilt tied in. So let me back up even on that for a minute. I want to say a little bit more about how the people pleasing was created for me. My mom, and again, I said that I'm a recovering codependent. My mom was codependent. My dad was an alcoholic. So I grew up in a dysfunctional alcoholic codependent home. And my mom couldn't necessarily, when I was a teenager, she couldn't control me and get me to be the way she wanted me to be. She couldn't get me to say what she wanted me to say, think the way she thought, or believe the way she believed. And as a teenager, I'm trying to find my own identity anyway, right? That's what we're supposed to do as teenagers. And she would say to me when she was upset with me, and let me tell you, when she was upset with me, it's not because I was breaking rules. It's not because I was doing something horrible and outlandish. I was a good girl. Like I was that girl that my teacher said, Kim's a pleasure to have in class. I was quiet. I followed the rules. I didn't speak up or speak out. I didn't defy her. I didn't do anything that would warrant her to be really upset with me. And yet, because of her own stuff going on, no fault to her, you know, my mother's passed on. I've made peace with it all. But because of where she was at in her own life, she would say things to me when she was upset. She would say, you know what? You are just like your father. You are so selfish. And selfish was just because I was just trying to be me and do me, not because I really was quote unquote selfish. But that seared on the inside of me in my head. And I think I have been spending the rest of my life trying not to be that selfish person.
Totally.
And then moms in and of itself were nurturers, were caretakers and rescuers and fixers. We want to take care of our kids. So it really, really, really became heightened for me when I became a mom.
Wow. Look at that.
So many freaking patterns.
Look at that. So what did you like read a book? Did you go to a seminar? How did you figure it out? Like, how did you sit down and say, oh, people pleasing, this is an issue. I need to start working on this. You take a seminar?
So I didn't really take a seminar. So the first thing when I was diagnosed with that autoimmune disease, like I said, self-care was, and I wasn't calling myself a people pleaser in those days, right? I just knew what it felt like. I knew what it felt like to be a perfectionist, to put that undue pressure on myself all the time, to get things right, to have it all put together, to be able to do it all. I knew what that felt like. I knew what it felt like to put other people's needs ahead of my own, to always be sensitive to how other people were feeling and not being sensitive to my own feelings, my own thoughts. But I didn't label it back then. I didn't label it. And then when my kids were in their early teen years, I went to I guess I went to a conference down in New York City.
Yeah.
And it was a conference for mindfulness in schools. I was a school teacher before I had my son. And I thought to myself, well, maybe I might want to do something with mindfulness in education. So I went to this conference. And the keynote speaker was Dr. Shefali Sabari. Have you heard of Dr. Shefali before? Okay, so she is she's like a guru on conscious parenting. And she happened to be the keynote speaker. As soon as she started speaking, for her whole entire talk, I sat there and sobbed. Like, I felt like she was talking to just me in the room. Wow. Everything that she said just pierced my soul. And I was having troubles with my relationships with my kids. Again, I think my son was 13 and my daughter was 10 at the time. And when you were reading my bio in the beginning, I was talking about how it's important to have those fulfilling relationships. My relationships were not fulfilling at all with anyone. How could they be? I was trying to please everybody else and not showing up as my true self. I was showing up with these masks on. So anyway, Dr. Shefali, the whole entire thing, I cried, and she is the guru on conscious parenting. I started taking all of her courses, and I started reading all of her books on conscious parenting, which in a nutshell has nothing to do with your kids. It has everything to do with reparenting the parent.
Wow.
So I really started diving deep into my own inner work at that time, even though up until that conference, I have gone to many Al-Anon meetings. I was in 12-step rooms a lot, codependent meetings, read a ton of self-help books. And so I did a lot of that stuff, therapy. I did a lot of talk therapy prior to working with her. But that really just kind of cracked me open even more.
Yeah.
And I really just started to, again, recognize my patterns. She talks a lot about patterns, and people pleasing and perfecting are patterns.
Yeah.
They're codependent patterns.
Yeah, definitely. While you're sharing some of your story here, I'm thinking about just people. And, there's so many individuals who can relate to exactly your same exact story, yet missing the piece of personal development in order to get over it. Right? With your experience, clients, podcasts, your community, what is your personal opinion? So not fact. What is your personal opinion on who should be striving towards dipping into personal development? Is this a human thing, or are there people that are exempt? Just nobody, certain people just don't have to do this. What's your personal opinion on that?
I think a majority of us do have to do the personal work. I had one therapist that he specialized in addiction and alcohol addiction and a couple other things. And he would tell me all the time that it's something like 95% of society struggles with issues, dysfunction, 95%.
Yeah.
So I do believe most of us, this is what I believe. I believe, first of all, we all come into the world knowing that we are worthy of love and belonging. We come in that way.
Yeah.
And then through conditioning, social conditioning, and our caregivers being fucked up themselves and they didn't know how to do it any differently. I think our generation is starting to turn that around. And I think the next generation, my kids, your son's generation, I feel like they are so much more self-aware and open to therapy and mental health. And I feel like they are just going to keep carrying the torch. But my mom and dad, I will tell you that when I was 19 years old and my sister was 14, and we were sitting in a counselor's office and they asked what I thought was the issue. And I said, I was 19. I said that I thought it was my dad, my dad's drinking and the way my mom is. They couldn't even hear that and acknowledge that. They got up, walked out of the office, and left my sister and I there to find our way home. Like, forget, you don't air our dirty laundry. You don't tell anybody anything. Therapist, no way. So that generation really just, what we did in my household, and I think in many households, is you bury it under the rug.
Totally.
And I also feel like parents did not really understand and have the awareness of what they were doing to their kids when they discounted their child's experience, when they discounted or dismissed their child's big feelings, or couldn't show up when their child had big feelings. When I was 6 years old, I remember crying and laying on the floor between the wall and my bed and just sobbing. That's where I would go to cry every time I was upset. No one came to nurture me or comfort me. From the time I was 6, that's where I would go all the time and just cry. Who was showing up for me when I had big feelings and emotions? Most parents, I believe, probably didn't, which is why our generation is struggling so much. That's why we have anxiety, depression, why we're overweight, in debt, gambling, just you hear Brene Brown talk about it, how messed up our society is.
Yeah.
And like I said, I think we're starting to, people like yourself and myself with our podcast and coaching. I mean, now there's a gazillion coaches, life coaches. You couldn't find coaches 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think things are going to shift and are shifting, which is really good.
Yeah, definitely. And, as far as you talking about the big feelings, what that really made me think of is just learning to regulate. If we we didn't know how to regulate it, and then no one sat down with us and said, hey, listen, when you're feeling these feelings, this is what you can do.
Yeah.
And that's, why there's addiction, why there's numbing substances, why there's people popping pills from doctors on both spectrums, legal and illegal, is because there's no teacher on how to regulate anger or sadness.
Yeah, for me, it was a whole package of Oreo cookies or half a gallon of ice cream. If I was feeling upset, that's how I calmed myself.
Yeah.
Let me grab a bag of chips or what, because I was 6 years old, I was 7 years old. I didn't know how to get anything else. So that was the thing I could control and get my hands on, was food to regulate. And I do see nowadays that in the schools, they are teaching kids about emotional regulation and emotional intelligence. There are some school systems that have mindfulness rooms and meditation rooms, and they're incorporating yoga. And I think that's amazing and awesome. So we have to start somewhere.
Yeah, definitely. I was just talking to somebody maybe about a month ago. They had mentioned the show The Bachelor or The Bachelorette.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, "Oh my gosh, that show's still on? I didn't even know that show was still on." And they're like, "Oh," and I was like, "I haven't seen that in, like, years." And they're like, "It's totally different now." I'm like, "What do you mean?" And they're like, "Well, back in the early days, it was lots of drama, like, so much drama and crying and screaming and swearing, and now there are actually people that are like, 'Let's sit and talk about it. Let's talk about the feelings. Let's chit chat. Let's, actually talking things out, actually like, I'm sure not all of them, right? But there's more of that being called out as far as that's not nice.
Yeah.
Don't
Isn't
ask
that
that.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
So you think about even the people who are creating that show, that where their level of awareness must be in order to say, this is what we want to put on the show. Now we need to go out and find people that will fit the bill and can have these kinds of conversations.
Yeah.
And what I do is, so I've created a process that I call my 5-step power pathway. And it's a repeatable process that I take myself through and I take others through. And the last step of power is radical responsibility. And there's lots of things that I teach during radical responsibility. I teach things like, okay, how to boundary set and hold the boundary, because for a people pleaser, so hard to do. But also I do teach things like how to have conscious communication, which means that you talk from a place of inarguable truths. It means that I just share with you, if you and I are in a conflict, I'm going to share with you my experience and how I feel. And I'm going to do it in a way that I'm not blaming you or pointing a finger that puts you on the defensive, that then just gets this dance of round and round we go. But in order to even get to that place, you have to go through the other steps of power in order to be clean and to be able to go in and self-regulate and heal those big feelings before having that kind of communication. But that's how you have more meaningful relationships. That's what I mean when I say I help others to have more meaningful relationships, because I help others to show up without the masks on, fully, wholly, authentically, not with the mask on. If you're going to show up with the mask on, you're not going to have fulfilling relationships. And I'm not saying this is an easy, oh, go take it off. It's a 1, 2, 3, because it's not. I have been married for 30 years. I've been doing this work for 20 plus years, this inner work, and I can still get caught in that old dance with my husband because the patterns are just so ingrained. So I don't want your listeners to think I'm coming on and saying it's easy peasy. It's not. You have to do a shit ton of work and you have to keep on top of it. You have to just check in with yourself over and over and over and over again. It's a daily, it's like brushing your teeth, but it's for, your inner landscape.
Yeah. Definitely a lot of self-talk as far as should have done that better.
Yes.
Next time. But yeah, really holding yourself accountable. And that's what it really is. It's like if you want to, if you want to up level, it's like you have to do it yourself.
100%.
Yourself, no one has to. I mean, I love that you're saying that. It's like you don't have to do anything. Like you can stay in that funk until you die. You can.
Yeah.
A lot of people have. Or you can choose to do the work, and as you do the work, it becomes softer and easier.
It does become softer and easier. And I want to say this too, because what I have been feeling is, and what's really motivating me and prompting me to continue to do this work daily, is I do not want to live a half-lived life. I don't want to be on my deathbed and say, I wish that I had done this differently. I wish I had showed up fully as my true self. I get chills thinking about it because I don't want that.
Yeah.
And as long as I keep the masks on, as long as I keep people pleasing and perfecting or showing up inauthentically, I feel that self-betrayal every single time. And it literally can make me feel sick, physically sick, if I'm betraying myself and living a half-lived life.
Yeah.
So you're right. No one has to do anything any differently. It's what do you want for yourself? And then how much do you value yourself? How much do you feel that you matter? And I didn't always feel that I mattered. Back when you asked me, what did I do a long time ago? I didn't feel that I mattered enough to do this, but little at a time, peeling back one layer at a time, cracking open the shell. It's like, okay, now I'm starting to feel it and own it.
Yeah. And I think what you're mentioning there is very powerful. When you think back, to the listeners, those of you that are listening live, by the way, thanks for those of you that are listening live. We appreciate you being here. For those of you watching on the replay, make sure you drop in the comments and say hello. But Kim, as far as the what if, I think that that's so powerful. And those that are listening can kind of reflect on that. Like when you think about your future, not having regrets in the area of the relationships that you have and the conversations and the warmth and do you want to sit back and say, ooh, I wish I did it different. I wish I would have showed up with more love. I wish I would have. And if you can kind of foresee that being a thing, that's a really heavy what if.
It is. It's a big motivator for me, for sure.
Yeah.
And I'll just point out one other thing too, is because you asked me early on, is whether or not people, I forgot how you asked the question, but whether or not people will feel like they need to do this work, or
are there people that are exempt?
Yes. And here, I don't know if anyone's exempt, but here's how someone can stay stuck and not realize that anything needs to be different, because I used to do this and I used to live it. It's when we point the finger and blame and allow I played the victim role so well. It was not me. It was my husband. It was my mom. It was my kids. It was this one. It was that one. It was everyone else, but not me. And as long as we stay stuck in that place of not taking ownership for our part in it, our co-creation, we will never feel powerful. We will always feel like a victim. And that doesn't mean that some people and some of your relationships aren't shitty and that some people aren't assholes at times or jerks. They have their part. I'm just talking about how I show up in it, my part in it. So that's part of the 5-step power pathway, is because O is ownership, own your shit. And that's where I really dive in and help others to break free from being that victim and how they can own it. Because owning doesn't mean that you need to shame yourself. Owning it doesn't mean you need to put yourself down. It's just having a perspective of like, oh, okay, there's my pattern. Oh, that's how I showed up as a people pleaser. And that's why this is happening. Or, oh, look at me trying to be a perfectionist. And that's why I feel this way. It's just having an awareness and a perspective. And then knowing, okay, now let me go in and feel what I need to feel. What's the big emotions underneath, and heal it, because it's coming from the past. It's coming from a childhood wound. And then being able to show up as an adult and show up differently with that person.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned this, because that I can tell you from personal experience, there was a pause in my personal development when I realized part of healing was forgiving. Because I was on a path, girl. I was like, look at me go, learning all the things, but still somewhat in the identity of victim. Of like, I almost started to like to like my ego started to kind of get big, where I was like, I'm learning all this stuff and you are bad. And, stay away, Satan, and lines. And I'm learning boundaries and kind of elevating myself, gaining that confidence, which is good, right? Good, 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 good.
Yes.
But if you really want to heal, if you're really getting to that top pinnacle of like authenticity, exactly what Kim was talking about is like an imperative step. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
To healing is laying down all of that shame on you, shame on you, shame on you, and mommy and daddy and exes and boyfriends and husbands and churches, right? All the people that we're pointing
Yeah.
blame at.
Yes, because you just keep yourself stuck in that villain victim role, another codependent pattern. Oh, my husband's a villain. The church, they're such villains. My mom was a villain. My dad was a villain. My brother was a villain.
Yeah.
Or still is. And poor me,
Yeah.
I'm the victim, even though I am a better version of myself because I did all the things, I've learned all the stuff, and then I can get on this high horse of being self-righteous. Like,
Yes, that's
I
exactly.
know because I did the freaking work.
Yeah.
I know what I'm talking about. You need to listen to me.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. But I love that your program includes that, because I think that is the
Yes.
most important step. Is you got to put down the that blame
Yes.
game's got to be put down, and stepping into that was tough for me. I'm like thinking back, I'm almost kind of getting emotional a little bit, because I remember when I came to a real realization of having to strip the identity of victim. It was like a real identity of like almost getting praised for my like, oh, good job, Sabrina, for stepping out of that and being, doing better and being better. And I'm so sorry you had to go. Shame on all of those people. And you're amazing. And still, that's an identity of victim.
100%.
And I had to like let go of that. There was
your
a
ego
point.
loves it though. Your ego
Yes.
loved it.
I remember specifically a shift of like, if I am no longer this like victim of like, then like, what the fuck am I?
Yeah.
Like and then I had to like create something. I had to like, I'm like, oh my God, I have to like make something.
Yes.
But that was the pinnacle. That was like the huge step into power and authenticity of like who I truly am, which is a mother, a single woman who swears. Taking a full circle. You like that, Kim?
I love that. Full circle. That was good. That was so good.
This is so cool, Kim. This is so cool. So it's a 5-step process. What's it called?
Power pathway. So yeah, I mean, it's so easy to remember because we all want to feel empowered or powerful. And so it's power.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Those that are listening live or on the replay, we're getting a really good idea of what you teach, what you're all about. However, can you tell us who specifically should be reaching out to you? Like, who specifically do you help so that they can reach out?
Anyone who really does struggle with the people pleasing and perfecting patterns. Now, if someone is feeling certain things, but they're not sure if they are a people pleaser or a perfectionist, I have a quiz on my website, a people pleasing perfectionist quiz. That's fun to do, very quick, very easy, and informative. We'll let you know if you're a people pleaser or if you're a perfectionist. So I don't want to just say it's just women. It's not just women, because there are women. Yes, a lot of women are people pleasers, but perfectionism can run rampant for women as it does for men. And there are many men that are like the good guy and struggle with people pleasing tendencies. Anyone that can relate or resonate with the characteristics of either or, anyone who feels like they're wearing a mask and they are not showing up fully in their life. And they're afraid to take off the mask. That's the key. I help people to not be as afraid to take it off by doing that inner work, by going in and healing and coming into wholeness. That's the key. Anyone that wants to come into wholeness so that they don't have that deathbed regret is someone I can work with and help. Now, the podcast Masks Off, I talk about a lot of things. And in particular, I do often have guests that come on that we talk about helping parents to help their teens and young adults. Because the idea is if parents are aware of their children putting on a mask, they can have them at a much younger age, right? I was 10 years old when I started, and I kept wearing them for decades, right?
Yeah.
But if I had more awareness back then, someone to teach me and show me and talk to me and help me to see my inherent worth and value, it might not have been so detrimental to me. So I bring on a lot of guests on the podcast to help parents and teachers to look for those signs and help teens and young adults.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So your website, kimgrosscoaching.com, is that where the quizzes are?
Yes.
Beautiful.
It's right on the first page.
Clickable link in the description, wherever you're watching this at. Where do you hang out on social media if someone wanted to follow you?
I'm on Instagram, Masks Off Community. I am on TikTok even. I'm on YouTube. You know, my platform for Masks Off is on Apple, Spotify, Google. I have the website, kimgrosscoaching.com. I'm on Facebook. I think I'm on just about every place there is close to.
Beautiful. Good, good, good. Well, this has been absolutely phenomenal. For those of you that resonate with Kim and all the goodness that she shared today, make sure you check out her website, kimgrosscoaching.com. She predominantly hangs out on Insta. At least that was the first one that she said. And we love to connect people, though. We love to connect people here so that we can all continue to rise. Any closing thoughts, Kim, as we wrap up?
I just think I would underscore and highlight what I said about asking yourself, oneself, do I want to live a half-lived life? Dr. Phil used to say all the time,
wow,
this is not a dress rehearsal. This is your life. Do you want to live a half-lived life? And if not, take the masks off because you matter.
That's awesome. I love Dr. Phil.
Me too.
I love Dr. Phil so much. I just love him.
I love him too.
That is so cool. Kim, I feel like I could talk to you for hours. This has been absolutely phenomenal. I so appreciate you coming on, sharing some awesome, juicy nuggets with us, and really helping individuals recognize who maybe didn't quite see it before, some of these tendencies that they have so that they can dive into a new world or a new way of doing things by linking up with somebody like you who can take them to the next level. So that brings us to the end of yet another incredible episode of Her Talk Show. Thank you, Kim, for sharing your wisdom. To all of our dedicated listeners, thank you for staying with us into the very end. Remember to follow, like, and share. Once again, I am your host, Sabrina Victoria, and I invite you to join our amazing community, Her Nation, where we continue to uplift each other every step of the way. Until next time, do something awesome today.